Good morning, vinyl community, crime community. I'm here to read out the epilogue of the Manson file. In offering the ultimate apocalypse edition of the Manson file, I hope that at least some of my readers will be moved to not only question the Manson's myth, illusory manufactured reality, but to doubt all official accounts, to question the veracity of the mass media in general, and to treat all mainstream versions of what really happened with healthy skepticism. If something sounds too unlikely to be true, as was the first reaction of many of the helter-skelter myth, or Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, or Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction, sing along with any number of other popular believed fantasies, then maybe it's too unlikely to be true. However, I write these words in the midst of unprecedented explosion of internet-bred insanity that I've termed not conspiracy theories, but conspiracy fantasy. So many encouragement of skepticism does not mean that one should merely accept the equally untrue alternative version of reality many irresponsible propagandists and delusion zealots on both sides of the political divide promulgate. Among the many myths I've sought to explode here is the persistent fantasy that there is such a thing as an objective author. None of the previous books about Manson were objective, even though they pretended to be. I make no claim that this one is either. I made no attempt to hide my biases. Yes, if I met with NIc Schreck, I could undo some of his biases. The Manson myth, a way is so strong that anyone that questions it, articles of faith, is immediately branded as a heretic, a Manson apologist, a Manson follower, a Manson fan, a revisionist, of a conspiracy theorist. I don't consider myself to be any of these things, but I know that won't make any difference to those who prefer to think otherwise. Each of us interprets this sensory data transmitted to us through our own personal filter of mental observation. The assures that our view of reality is constantly mutable, impermanent, and always object to revision. I have done my best to create an accurate, verbal picture of this one complex but small neighborhood of reality as was possible. But I am keenly aware that the whole idea of what I sought to explore was still veiled in shadow and always will be. In that sense, the Manson file, like the phenomenon it explores, must remain an open file. Does that kind of remind you like the JFK open file? Literally so, shortly before I completed this book, previous edition, a former law enforcement official informed me that when he made a routine request to see the FBI Manson file in Washington, D.C. National Archives, he was told that the file was not made available to the public. When he added why, the baffled archivist said that the case was still open, which implies that the crimes were still under investigation. Why a case supposedly solved in 1971 was still open in 2011, in yet another mystery. I have learned anything during my long descent down this rabbit hole is that there will never be a final word on this subject. In anticipation of the ceaseless flow as of yet unknown information that will emerge for decades to come, I initiated the Manson File Myth of Reality of the Outlaw Shaman Official Circle Facebook group on November 11, 2017, since migrated to Abraxas Circle due to Facebook censorship. Interested readers are welcome to apply there if they wish to be kept abreast of the inevitable shocks and surprises the future holds. Considering the vagaries of the internet, other forums independent of corporate control and censorship are also in the works. Shortly after the inauguration of that group, Charles ceased to exist. His passion set in motion a courtroom drama played by several contending litigants fighting for Charlie's mortal remains and the legal fights to his estate. I hope that this last chapter of our subject's conflict-riven time on this earth would have been completed by now so that I could definitively chronicle the sordid episode of ghouls and greed. As yet, as of this writing, 4 years later, the legal struggle dribbles on. Rather than provide what would of necessity have been an incomplete telling of that twisted tale, I will wait until the final nails in the Charlie's unquiet coffin have been hammered to address that was still fluid situation. Until then, I refer interested readers to listen online to my radio report, Cease to Exist, the death, funeral, and desecration of Charles Manson, broadcast in the August of 2018 episode of my periodic radio show transmitted by Berlin's Radio On. The program features my interviews with Charles Manson's son, Michael Brunner. I sat Michael Brunner on my knee when he was in diapers, and I bounced him up and down like my grandfather did to me. Charles's closest friend, Derek Hayes, and Tony Spurl, a former law enforcement officer who witnessed Charles' reality TV freak show as a pseudo-funeral produced by spurious ghost hunter Zach Bagans. All three of my guests were of immeasurable help in supporting this work. They may be the last pages of this file, but the search into this eternal enigma has really just begun. Charles' longtime correspondent, Ben Gurecki, is conducting investigation, first-hand research on Charlie's youth and family background, which he plans to reveal in an appropriate medium. Eric Bezzery is working on a fascinating anthology of never-before-seen private correspondence between Charlie and his commune. The opus promised to fill in the many gaps in our understanding, especially the other's neglected human, all too human side of this often overblown saga. Derek Hayes is currently transcribing his voluminous treasure trove of illuminated and candid telephone conversations with Charlie for eventual release. Dennis LaCalandra's painstakingly compiled Google Earth Manson mythos map is an indispensable tool showing how close the case-related drug dealers live to each other. This ongoing research builds a formidable Watson file exposing Cielo Drive as the tip of an underworld iceberg concealing a much wider international narcotics trafficking operation. Considering how rapidly this most mercurial and mysterious of cases changes, it would be wrong to tie things together in a neat bow and pretend that everything is resolved now. Let it end on a note of absolute certainty before these words fall into the silence of all things that can never be written. The next part, we're going to end here now because the next part is Appendix A, Easter Monday audience with the Underworld Pope. Charles Manson interviewed and decoded, transcribed and annotated by NIc Schreck. So they're going to talk about a lot of things, 5 levels of communication that Charlie communicated with his words, his secret antics, his hostility towards a Caucasian officer, sympathetic report to a black audience, to the black police officer, an intermittent awareness to the cameraman and his theatrical audience. So he was thinking 6 ways at one time. So we're going to go into all that tomorrow. This is an interview with Charlie Manson where he's basically going to talk about everything. So we need to listen to Charlie. So this is going to go on for a while. So we'll say thank you to the vinyl community. And if you like my stream and you think there's any truth here, I would love to earn your subscription.